Hi, this is Dr. Palmer, and today we're going to talk about money and elections. This is a chapter in which we're going to be getting into some issues of financing and how money plays into our election process. Our objectives here today are to explain the issues raised by campaign spending. We'll describe the various sources of funding for campaign spending. We'll examine the federal law that regulates campaign finance. We'll outline the role of the Federal Election Commission in enforcing campaign finance laws, and we'll describe loopholes in today's campaign finance laws. Vocabulary that you should know today is Political Action Committee, or PAC, subsidy, soft money, and hard money. Running for public office costs money, and often a lot of it. That fact creates some difficult problems in American politics. It leaves open the possibility that candidates will try to buy their way into public office. It also makes it possible for special interests to try to buy favors from those who are already in office. Clearly, government by people must be protected from these dangers. But how? Parties and candidates must have money. Without it, they can't campaign or do any of the things they must do to win elections. In short, money is an absolute necessity, and it is absolutely necessary for campaigning. Yet, the getting and spending of campaign funds can corrupt the entire political process. No one really knows how much money is spent on elections in the United States. Reliable estimates of total spending in recent presidential elections estimate them in the billions of dollars. These figures include nominations and general elections for offices at all levels. The presidential election eats up by far the largest share of campaign dollars. For 2012, total spending for the major and minor parties, including primaries, conventions, and presidential campaigns, came to at least $4.6 billion. The vast sum spent on congressional campaigns also continues to climb election after election. Spending in the Senate and House races in 2012 came to nearly $787 million. That figure passed the $750 million that was spent in 1998. That figure as well is continuing to go up every day. Radio and television time, professional campaign managers and consultants, newspaper advertisements, pamphlets, buttons, posters and bumper stickers, office rent polls, data processing, mass mailings, websites, travel. These and a host of other items make up the huge sums spent in campaigns. Television is by far the largest item in the typical campaign budget. A single half hour of network TV time can run as much as $500,000, and a 30-second spot in prime time runs to at least $150,000. As Will Rogers put it years ago, you have to be loaded just to get beat. Of course, the total amount spent in particular races varies widely. How much depends on the office involved, the opposition, the candidate, whether he or she is the incumbent, and the availability of campaign funds. Parties and their candidates draw their money from two basic sources: private contributors and the public treasury. Private givers have always been the major source of campaign funds in American politics. Those givers include the following. 1. Small contributors. Those who give $5 or $10 or so, and only occasionally. In fact, only about 10% of people of voting age ever make campaign contributions. Parties and candidates must look, therefore, to other places for much of their funding. 2. Wealthy individuals and families, the so-called fat cats, who can afford large donations and find it in their best interest to make them. 3. Candidates, both incumbents and challengers, their families, and importantly, people who hold and want to keep appointed public offices. Ross Perot holds the all-time record in this category. He spent some $65 million of his own money on his independent bid for the presidency in 1992. 4. Various non-party groups, especially political action committees. Political action committees are political arms of special interest groups which have a major stake in public policy. 5. Temporary organizations. Groups formed for the immediate purpose of a campaign, including fundraising. Hundreds of these short-lived units spring up every 2 years and at every level in American politics. Then, too, parties and their candidates often hold fundraisers of various sorts. The most common are $100, $500, and $1,000 plate luncheons, dinners, picnics, receptions, and similar gatherings. Some of these events reach the $100,000 or more level during the 2000 presidential campaign. Direct mail requests, telephones, and internet solicitations are also among the often used tools of those who raise campaign money. Another source of funds has recently emerged: public subsidies for federal and/or state treasuries. A subsidy is a grant of money, usually from a government. Subsidies have so far been most important at the presidential level, as you will see shortly. Campaign donations are a form of political participation. Those who make them do so for a number of reasons. Many contributors give simply because they believe in a party or a candidate. Many of those who give, however, want access to the government, and they hope to get it by helping their, quote, friends win elections. Hence, some contributors give to both sides in a contest. Heads they win, and tails they still win. Some big donors want appointments to public office, and others want to keep the ones they have. Some long for social recognition. For them, dinner at the White House, meeting with a cabinet official, or knowing the governor on a first-name basis may be enough. Organized labor, business, professionals, and various other groups have particular policy aims. They want certain laws passed, changed, or repealed, or certain administrative actions taken. Congress first began to regulate the use of money in federal elections in 1907. In that year, it became unlawful for any corporation or national bank to make a money contribution in any election to candidates for federal office. Since then, Congress has passed several laws to regulate the use of money in presidential and congressional campaigns. Today, these regulations are found in 3 detailed laws: the Federal Election Campaign Act, FECA, of 1971, the FECA Amendments of 1974, and the FECA Amendments of 1976. The earliest federal laws were loosely drawn, not often obeyed, and almost never enforced. The 1971 law replaced them. The 1974 law was the major legislative response to the Watergate scandal of the Nixon years. The 1976 law was passed in response to a landmark Supreme Court decision, Buckley v. Vallejo, in 1976. A few minor changes were made to those laws in 1979. Congress does not have the power to regulate the use of money in state and local elections. Every state now regulates at least some aspects of campaign finance, however, some of them more effectively than others. The Federal Election Commission administers all federal law dealing with campaign finance. Set up by Congress in 1974, the Federal Election Commission is an independent agency in the executive branch. Its 6 members are appointed by the President with Senate confirmation. The laws of the Federal Election Commission the Federal Election Commission enforces covers 4 broad areas. They 1. Require the timely disclosure of campaign finance data. 2. Place limits on campaign contributions. 3. Place limits on campaign expenditures. And 4. Provide public funding or subsidies for several parts of the presidential election process. Congress first required the reporting of certain campaign finance information in 1910. Today, the disclosure requirements, which are intended to spotlight the place of money in federal campaigns, are very detailed. In fact, the reports that candidates must file with the FEC are so comprehensive that nearly all candidates for federal office find that their campaign organizations must include at least one and often several certified public accountants. No individual group can make a contribution in the name of another. Cash gifts of more than $100 are prohibited. So too are contributions from any foreign source. All contributions to a candidate for federal office must be made through a single campaign committee. Only that committee can spend the candidate's campaign money. All contributions and spending must be closely accounted for by that one committee. Any contribution or loan of more than $200 must be identified by source and by date. Any spending over $200 must be identified by the name of the person or firm to whom payment was made, by date, and by purpose. Any contribution of more than $5,000 must be reported to the FEC no later than 48 hours after it is received. So too must any sum of $1,000 or more that is received in the last 20 days of a campaign. Congress first began to regulate campaign contributions in 1907, when it outlawed donations by corporations and national banks. A similar ban was first applied to labor unions in 1943. Individual contributions became subject to regulation in 1939. Today, no person can give more than $2,100 to any federal candidate in a primary election. In addition, no person can give more than $1,000 to any federal candidate's general election campaign. Also, no person can give more than $5,000 in any year to a political action committee, or $26,700 to a national party committee. The total of any person's contributions to federal candidates and committees must be limited to no more than $101,400 in any election cycle, or every 2 years. Those limits may seem generous. In fact, they are very tight. Before those limits were imposed in 1974, many wealthy individuals gave far greater amounts. In 1972, for example, W. Clement Stone, a Chicago insurance executive, contributed more than $2 million to President Richard Nixon's re-election campaign. Richard Mellon Shaffey, heir to oil, aluminum, and banking fortunes, gave more than $1 million to that campaign. Neither corporations nor labor unions can contribute to any candidate running for a federal office. Their political action committees, however, can and do. Recall that PACs are the political arms of special interest groups, business, labor, professional, cause, and other organizations that try to influence government policies. You will look at interest groups at length in Chapter 9, but their PACs deserve special attention here. While PACs operate in every part of the political scene, their clout comes mostly from their ability to raise campaign money and their willingness to give it to their friends who run for public office. Some 4,000 PACs are registered with the Federal Election Commission today. Leading examples include BIPAC, the Business Industry Political Action Committee, COPE, the AFL-CIO's Committee on Public Education, AMPAC, the American Medical Association Political Action Committee, and the National Education Associations, NEPAC. Any list of the most powerful of these groups must also include the American Bankers Association, BankPAC, the American Trial Lawyers, PAC, and Emily's List, which seeks to increase the number of women among the Democratic members of Congress. Emily's List takes its name from this political maxim: early money is like yeast, it makes the dough rise. PACs fill their campaign war chests with contributions from their members. Members are found among the executives, employees, and stockholders of corporations, labor union members, doctors, dentists, teachers, and lawyers, those who favor or oppose gun control or abortion, and so on. These groups bundle all of their members' gifts of money, pooling them together. Then they distribute money to those candidates who, 1, are sympathetic to the PAC's policy goals, and 2, have a reasonable chance of winning their races. No PAC can give more than $5,000 to any one federal candidate in an election, or $10,000 per election cycle, primary and general elections. However, there is no overall limit on PAC giving to candidates. Each PAC can give up to $5,000 per election to as many candidates as it chooses. A PAC may also contribute up to $15,000 a year to a political party. PACs put an estimated $400 million into presidential and congressional campaigns in 2000. They funneled untold other millions into state and local contests as well. SuperPACs. SuperPACs are a new kind of political action committee created in July 2010. Technically known as independent expenditure only committees, SuperPACs may raise unlimited amounts of money from corporations, unions, associations, and individuals, then spend unlimited sums to overtly advocate for or against political candidates. SuperPACs must, however, report their donors to the FEC on a monthly or quarterly basis, the SuperPAC's choice of which, as a traditional PAC would. Unlike traditional PACs, SuperPACs are prohibited from donating money directly to political candidates. Congress first began to limit federal campaign spending in 1925. Most of the limits now on the books apply only to presidential, not congressional elections. This fact is due mostly to the Supreme Court's decision in Buckley v. Valeo, 1976. In Buckley, the High Court struck down several spending limits set by the FECA amendments of 1974. It held each of those restrictions to be contrary to the First Amendment's guarantee of freedom of expression. In effect, said the court, in politics, money is speech. The most important of the provisions the court threw out: 1. Limited campaign expenditures by candidates running for seats in the House or Senate. 2. Limited how much of their own money candidates could put into their own campaigns. And 3. Said that no person or group could spend more than $1,000 on behalf of any federal candidate without that candidate's permission. The court also held that several limits that the FEC law of 1974 placed on spending apply only to candidates who accept campaign subsidies from the FEC. Candidates who do not take FEC money are not bound by those limits. For 2000, major party contenders who used FEC money could spend no more than $40.5 million in the pre-convention period. George W. Bush, who did not accept FEC money until his general election campaign, spent approximately twice that much before the Republicans held their convention in Philadelphia in July. After the conventions in the general election campaign, the two major party nominees in 2000, Al Gore and George Bush, could not spend more than $67.6 million. In addition, neither the Democratic nor Republican National Committee could lay out more than $13.7 million for the presidential campaign. It is also possible for a minor party's presidential candidate to qualify for FEC subsidy. In 2000, the Reform Party's Pat Buchanan received $12.7 million for his campaign. Congress first began to provide for public funding of presidential campaigns in the Revenue Act of 1971. It broadened sections of that law in 1974 and again in 1976. The 1971 law set up the Presidential Election Campaign Fund. Every person who files a federal income tax return can check off or assign $3 of his or her tax payment, $6 on a joint return, to the fund. The monies in the fund are used every 4 years to finance 1. Pre-convention campaigns, 2. National conventions, and 3. Presidential election campaigns. The FEC administers the public subsidy process. Pre-convention campaigns. Presidential primary and caucus campaigns are supported by the private contributions a candidate raises, plus the public money he or she receives from the FEC. To be eligible for public funds, a contender must raise at least $100,000 in contributions from individuals, not organizations. That amount must be gathered in $5,000 lots in each of at least 20 states, with each of those lots built from individual donations of not more than $250. This requirement is meant to discourage frivolous candidates. For each presidential hopeful who passes this test, the FEC will match the first $250 of each individual donation to that candidate, up to a total of half of the overall limit on primary spending. Thus, in 2000, the FEC could give some contenders nearly $20 million because the ceiling was close to $40 million for each candidate. The FEC does not match contributions from PACs or other political organizations. For 2000, all of the major party presidential hopefuls combined spent nearly $200 million on their pre-conventions campaigns. This figure included some $80 million in matching funds from the FEC. 2. National conventions. If a major party applies for the money, it automatically receives a grant to pay for its national convention. The two parties each received $13.5 million from the FEC for that purpose in 2000. The Reform Party received $2.5 million for its convention as well. 3. Presidential election campaigns. Every major party nominee automatically qualifies for a public subsidy to cover the costs of the general election campaign. For the 2000 election, that subsidy amounted to $67.6 million. A candidate can refuse that money, of course. Should that ever happen, the candidate would be free to raise however much he or she could from private sources. A minor party candidate can also qualify for public funding, but not automatically. To be eligible, the minor party must either 1. Have won at least 5% of the popular vote in the last presidential election, or 2. Win at least that much of the total vote in the current election. In the latter case, the public money is received after the election and so could not possibly help the candidate in that election. Remember, many provisions of both federal and state election law are purposely drawn to discourage minor party and independent efforts and thus help strengthen the two-party system. Except for Ross Perot in 1996, few minor party candidates have come even remotely close to winning 5% of the popular vote in any election since the subsidy arrangement was put in place. Over that period, 1976 through 2000, however, 2 independent candidates did exceed the 5% threshold. John Anderson received 6.7% of the popular vote in 1980. He therefore received $4.2 million from the FEC after that election. Ross Perot won 19% of the vote in 1992. Thus, the FEC ruled that he was eligible to receive $29.2 million from the Presidential Election Campaign Fund to finance his Reform Party candidacy in 1996. Perot won 8% of the popular vote in 1996, and so the Reform Party's candidate, Pat Buchanan, qualified for the federal subsidy in 2000. Nearly 40 years ago, President Lyndon Johnson described the then current body of campaign finance law as, quote, more loophole than law, end quote. We have come very close to that point at which that comment could be applied to today's federal election money statutes. 3 immense loopholes have appeared in those laws over the past 25 years, and huge torrents of cash have gushed through them. Those loopholes involve 1. Soft money, 2. Independent campaign spending, and 3. Issue ads. 1. Soft money. Federal law neither limits nor requires the reporting of soft money. Soft money includes those contributions made to state and local party organizations for such party-building activities as voter registration and get-out-the-vote drives, party mailings and advertisement, and similar efforts. Soft money contributions come from wealthy individuals, many PACs, and elements both of major parties' national organization. Those funds bypass the reporting requirements and the amount limits that apply to hard money or campaign money that is subject to regulations by the FEC. State and local organizations in both major parties have found it easy to filter this unregulated money into the party's presidential and congressional campaigns. The soft money loophole ballooned from an estimated $19 million in 1980 to some $500 million in 2000. 2. Independent campaign spending. According to federal election law, an independent person or group is one that participates in a campaign entirely on its own, with no connection to a candidate or party involved in that election. Such a person or group can spend, not contribute to a candidate or party, but spend as it chooses, an unlimited amount of money in that campaign. That spending can be made to help a candidate, of course, but it has much more often been directed against a candidate. Congress tried to minimize such independent activity in 1974 by limiting that spending to no more than $1,000 per candidate in any election. In 1976, however, the Supreme Court struck down that limit in Buckley v. Vallejo, again on the money is speech ground. Independent campaign spending has played an increasing important role in both presidential and congressional elections ever since. 3. Issue ads. The congressional campaigns of 1998 and the presidential and congressional contests in 2000 saw a surge in a new form of political advertising, the so-called issue ads. These pitches, found mostly on radio and television, deal with such controversial areas as public policy, issues in Social Security, healthcare, and foreign trade. Issue ads do not mention the names of those candidates the ad supporters support or hope to defeat. Since they do not say in so many words, vote for Joe Smith or vote against Sue Spratt, they are not covered by the disclosure requirements or spending limits of federal law. Most voters have little trouble making the connections these ads intend, however.